It goes without saying that WrestleMania is the centerpiece of WWE's entire calendar year. It's the show where so many big things happen, where the biggest storylines of the year end or begin. But as the years have gone by, SummerSlam has become almost as important to the company's brand and their storytelling as it serves as the perfect midpoint between WrestleManias. Nearly 2 decades ago, WWE began referring to Shawn Michaels as Mr. WrestleMania, not just for the number of manias he'd been at, but for his uncanny ability to steal the show nearly every time. It could be argued that The Undertaker also has a claim to that nickname. Even though he's got a special connection to Survivor Series, it was WrestleMania where the streak grew, and where he wrestled some of the most memorable matches in company history. When thinking about all that, it got my mind going somewhere else. As we get closer to SummerSlam later this month in Detroit, which legend deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as his iconic show? Who truly deserves to be known as Mr. SummerSlam? And could it be someone who is actively wrestling right now? To find out, first we have to look at who has performed at SummerSlam more than anyone else. As of this video, only 11 people have wrestled on the show 10 or more times, though since Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker already have Mania on lock, for the purpose of this video, I'm taking them out of the conversation. Then from there, it comes down to criteria like historical impact, classic matches, career-defining moments, and after careful consideration, we here at Wregret HQ have narrowed the list down to 5 candidates. This week, we look at the august accomplishments of Bret Hart, Triple H, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, and John Cena to try and settle the debate. Who is Mr. SummerSlam? Settle in, because we're fixin' to find out. Let's begin with the Hitman. At the inaugural SummerSlam in 1988, Bret and his partner Jim Neidhart served as the first high-profile challengers for Demolition in a losing effort for the tag titles. It gave the Demos a big pay-per-view victory and helped further the Hart Foundation's contractual obligation storyline with their former manager Jimmy Hart. While the match was fine, it didn't have a lot of long-term impact, and these teams would have a far better encounter 2 years later. The next year, at SummerSlam '89, the Harts again served as the fall guys to the tag team champions when they faced the Brainbusters. And to put extra salt in the wound, the titles weren't even on the line, though that was done more to put heat on Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, as the match was signed before they won the belts. Another good match, but it lacked a proper storyline. Meanwhile, Arn and Tully would be out of the company less than 4 months later. At SummerSlam '90, the Hart Foundation finally got what many consider their crowning moment as a team when they beat Demolition in an epic 2 out of 3 falls match. This match served as the swan song for Demolition as a team, as Axe had been replaced as a regular member by Crush due to a heart condition. Besides, now that the Road Warriors had arrived in the company, the luster was off the generic version now that the name brand version had arrived. After several false starts, Bret's singles career finally took off when he challenged Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam '91 in Madison Square Garden, a venue that would prove to be the home for numerous landmark career moments for the Hitman. After a classic match that saw Kurt do a solid for his friend by putting him over huge despite a crippling back injury that would shelve him for over a year afterward, Bret won his first singles title and to top it off, embraced his parents Stu and Helen in the crowd after the match. Bret's family would continue to take part in some of his biggest career moments, like in 1992 when he defended that same Intercontinental title against his brother-in-law Davey Boy Smith in front of more than 80,000 fans at Wembley Stadium. Even though Bret lost the match, it's gone down as one of the greatest SummerSlam moments of all time, and unquestionably the British Bulldog's biggest career accomplishment. It was this performance that moved Bret to the front of the line just a few weeks later, when the company was looking to change their image in the wake of the steroid scandal and chose Hart as the next WWF champion. The following year featured Bret's most unique match, or rather matches, in his Summerslam catalog. Scheduled to face Jerry Lawler in his pay-per-view debut, the King welched on his commitment, coming out on crutches and appointing his court jester Doink the Clown to take his place. After a solid match between 2 of the best workers in the company that saw Bret victorious, Lawler attacked Bret with his crutch and the advertised match was underway. Hart was incensed to the point where he had the match won, but refused to release the sharpshooter on his hated rival, leading to a DQ win for Jerry. It was a spectacle to behold, and it's a shame that Bret and Lawler weren't able to finish their feud for a while for, reasons. But much like in his SummerSlam matchup, Jerry was able to get out of his legal trouble due to a technicality. The Hart family strife continued the following year as Bret faced Owen, who had been in the front row the previous year and had now been manipulated by jealousy and brother-in-law Jimmy Jam to turn his back on Bret. The two upped the ante from their classic WrestleMania 10 encounter in another all-timer, this time in the big blue steel cage. It was an awesome match, and you'd be forgiven if you thought this battle for the WWF Championship had headlined the show. That honor, however, was reserved for the Undertaker vs. Undertaker match. Those two matches happened back to back, and if that's not the biggest example of the highs and lows the Federation was going through creatively at this time, I don't know what is. 1 year later, Bret was able to resume his program with Lawler and beat him in a Kiss My Foot match at that year's King of the Ring. In response, Jerry summoned his personal dentist, Isaac Yankem DDS, to do his dirty work against the Hitman at Summerslam. Though this is a match pitting two future Hall of Famers against each other, the less said about it, the better. Bret would take some time off after he lost the Iron Man match to Shawn Michaels at Wrestlemania 12, meaning he missed SummerSlam 96 altogether, but his penultimate appearance the following year would prove to be historic in more ways than one. In another classic main event that many claim was the catalyst for the Attitude Era, Bret would defeat The Undertaker to win his 5th WWF Championship, tying Hulk for the record at the time. This match would be known as the beginning of the end for the Hitman's historic run in the Federation. Fast forward a whopping 13 years into the future. Bret Hart had been screwed in Montreal, concussed in Washington, suffered a stroke in Calgary, and through it all was able to recover with his head held high. He settled the beef with Vince McMahon and Shawn Michaels, and even made a couple of in-ring appearances, like at SummerSlam 2010 when he joined Team Cena in their battle versus Team Nexus, in what was largely a token appearance due to his health. Though Bret's SummerSlam career ended not with a bang but a whimper, he still established the standard of excellence, of execution in that first decade of the pay-per-view's history.
It's time to play the game.
It took a couple of years for Hunter Hearst Helmsley to find himself, both as a SummerSlam participant and as a wrestler in general. In 1995, he debuted on pay-per-view against the unremarkable Bob Sparkplug Holly in an unremarkable match. Nothing special, but still better than in 1996 when he wasn't on the card at all, part of the fallout that Helmsley in particular suffered since the infamous curtain call incident. By 1997, Hunter had paid his political debt and was finally finding himself as an act, slowly evolving out of the Connecticut snob persona, adding China as his bodyguard, and entering the first really engaging feud of his career against Mankind, who was also beginning to break free of the engaging but one-dimensional shackles of his original gimmick. The two met in a terrific steel cage match to open that year's SummerSlam. Though H lost the match, it did give him a little more street cred, and it gave Foley one of his more iconic moments. 1 year later, Triple H was in full DX leader mode and in the thick of his career-defining feud with The Rock. The highway to hell led to SummerSlam 98 at MSG, where the two fought for the Intercontinental Championship in a ladder match. Shawn and Razor's ladder match in the same building 4 years earlier was a tough act to follow, but Rock and Triple H had a great spectacle of their own, one of the show's clear bright spots. While Triple H was the victor in the match, it was a definite case of winning the battle but losing the war, as he injured his knee in the match to the point where he soon had to vacate the title. The trend of marginalized career moments at SummerSlam continued the following year for Triple H in 1999. What was meant to be his big crowning moment in his first SummerSlam main event, winning the WWF Championship from Steve Austin, was suddenly kiboshed. While some theorize that Stone Cold pulled rank, another guess is that the office of Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura didn't like the idea of him raising a heel's hand at the end of the night. Either way, Mankind was hastily injected into the match so he could take the title off of Austin, so H could beat him for it one night later. This didn't really hurt Triple H's career in the long term, though, as he spent 2000 as the main antagonist of programming. The main event of SummerSlam 2000 was built around H's dual goals of winning the title back from The Rock and keeping Kurt Angle from perving all over his wife Stephanie. In the end, he put The Rock over in the middle of the ring. Stephanie seemed poised to join Angle and initiate a Triple H face run, but the reason that whole storyline was stopped dead in its tracks is another story. Triple H ended up missing the following year's SummerSlam and most of 2001 altogether, including the Invasion, thanks to his huge quad tear in a match on Raw. Man, what timing! Is he the smartest wrestler or what? It's all about the long game. H returned in early 2002 to a huge reaction, but by the summer his babyface run had run its course, so he turned heel and became the perfect foil for a returning Shawn Michaels. The two friends over-delivered in a street fight that may very well be one of the greatest SummerSlam matches of all time, and heralded the return of one of the best performers of a generation in HBK. And then 2003 was a frustrating time for wrestling fans who liked having nice things, as Triple H's run with the World Championship on Raw was similar to hanging a 20-pound kettlebell off your nuts. The H-Man was actually injured going into that year's SummerSlam, set to defend the title in an Elimination Chamber match. His injury had left him severely limited in the ring, and logic dictated that the match was Goldberg's to win. But an idea that crazy requires a whole lot of oxygen in order to grow and thrive, and needless to say, Hunter sucked all that oxygen out of the building on that night. One smack with a sledgehammer later, and that's all it took for Trips to kill Goldberg's mystique, all to lay the groundwork for Bill to beat him for the belt 1 month later on a much smaller stage. Compared to this run, Triple H's next few years at SummerSlam went down into the dregs, but if anything, it proved he was a team player. 2004 saw the peak of the bizarre super push of the Eugene character, Eric Bischoff's special nephew. After being seduced into Evolution, manipulated, and then betrayed, Eugene went for revenge on H in a SummerSlam match that he would ultimately lose. They'd have a pair of rematches later on TV, including a cage match that gets more uncomfortable to watch with each passing decade. And speaking of uncomfortable, how's about a couple of 40-something-year-old guys embracing their inner 14-year-olds? The original D-Generation X, minus Chyna and Rick Rude, made their long-awaited return as a team in 2006 and got to run roughshod over the rest of the Raw roster as a result. In a match that saw Hunter and Shawn embarrass everyone from the Spirit Squad to the Big Show to William Regal to Finlay to Mr. Kennedy to Umaga, they also managed to beat Vince and Shane McMahon at that year's SummerSlam. Now, buy that merch! 2007 saw King Booker wrap up his time as a full-time performer in WWE, so naturally he had to once again do the job of Triple H in a match to see which of them was the regalist in all the land. Trips took one for the team once again in 2008 when he tried his hardest to convince the world that the Great Khali was a viable WWE title contender. In 2009, it was time for Hunter and Shawn to jump back on the DX gravy train, or gravy tank. In their last SummerSlam appearance as full-timers, they gave back to the younger generation by cutting Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase Jr. off at the legs. No way this is going to have any long-term ramifications on the wrestling business. After taking a couple of years off, Hunter returned in 2012 for his final in-ring SummerSlam match to perform the duty of putting Brock Lesnar over strong. Triple H would do the honors for Brock in one of the few clean submission losses of his entire career, and one of his better SummerSlam performances. While his run from 1997 to 2002 was pretty strong, at this point I think Bret had the better run between the two. It was more consistent, more noteworthy, and provided more career-defining moments. I mean, how much stronger of a SummerSlam debut can you make than this? Only halfway into his rookie year, Brock Lesnar proved that he was indeed the next big thing, showing up to SummerSlam 2002 in the main event and crushing The Rock to become, at the time, the youngest WWE champion in history. By SummerSlam the following year, Brock had gone through a poorly executed babyface run and was just settling into an even worse executed heel run. Nevertheless, he and Kurt Angle delivered in another great match, even if it was partly bogged down by some McManigans. Lesnar tapped out to Kurt's ankle lock in their title match, setting things up for their Iron Man match a few weeks later that saw Lesnar regain the gold. In early 2004, Brock left WWE to do anything else other than be on the road 300 days a year, and finally returned to the fold 9 years later. Though his initial return in 2012 left a lot to be desired, he made up for it by beating Triple H in the SummerSlam match we previously discussed. SummerSlam 2013 saw the wrestling equivalent of the Incredible Hulk vs. Wolverine as Brock took on CM Punk, who had dared to turn babyface on the Walrus. The two men put on one of the best matches of the year that ended with Lesnar getting the Duke. More so than his work with John Cena or Triple H since his return, I would argue that this match proved that Brock was more than a one-note performer. Not that being a one-note performer is necessarily a bad thing. Case in point, 2014. The main event of that year's SummerSlam saw one of the most shocking and definitive defeats in WWE history. In a spot that was originally planned for Daniel Bryan, Brock Lesnar destroyed John Cena in a way that no top star in WWE had ever been destroyed before. Coming off ending The Undertaker's streak just months earlier at WrestleMania 30, Brock's decisive win marked a sea change for the company as he finally fulfilled his destiny as the king of WWE, serving a symbolic end to the big run of John Cena as we knew it. The following year, The Undertaker returned to get revenge on the Beast Incarnate for ending the Mania streak. After a rough couple of years, Undertaker had his best match since the Punk match at WrestleMania, and he and Brock proved that they are perfect opponents for each other. Taker would do a visual tap out for Brock, but it was missed by the referee. The ensuing confusion allowed for the dead man to low blow and choke out Lesnar in an attempt at a heel turn that didn't quite take. 2016 saw Lesnar take on Randy Orton in a match hyped up as the first time these two longtime vets from the same OVW class had faced off one-on-one on pay-per-view. The match ended in brutal fashion, with Lesnar legit splitting Orton's head open with several vicious elbow strikes in a beating so realistic that Chris Jericho confronted Lesnar backstage following the match, not realizing it was an agreed-upon spot. After that, Brock's SummerSlam bookings became a bit more muddled. He spent many of the next several years being a key component in the growth and the arc of Roman Reigns as a top star, and you could argue that Brock's career suffered a bit because of it. In 2017, Lesnar defended the WWE title against Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, and Roman in a fatal four-way match. He was taken out early in the match by everyone else, only to return later on and eventually pin Roman to retain. The following year, Brock again faced, you guessed it, Roman Reigns. Braun Strowman distracted Lesnar with a threat of cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase, which allowed Roman to pin Brock and end his 504-day reign with the Universal Championship. Nothing fans will get behind more than a babyface who needs help from another babyface to win a title. In 2019, Lesnar was finally allowed to move on to another Shield member. At Extreme Rules, Brock had cashed in his briefcase against Seth Rollins to regain the Universal Championship, but where they had failed with Roman, they at least tried to make up for it with Rollins, as the Beast Slayer beat Lesnar in the first clean world title loss of Brock's career. Brock took 2 years off of wrestling during the pandemic, finally returning in 2021 to wrestle, you guessed it, Roman Reigns. This feud basically went on for an entire year, as if fans hadn't already grown sick of these two fighting over the last 7 years. At least this time it was a role reversal in the face-heel positions, and Country Brock was in full swing when they faced off at SummerSlam in Nashville for what, so far, has been the last time ever. This ridiculous last man standing match saw all the bells and whistles, but even Brock flipping the ring over with a damn tractor couldn't quell the force of the bloodline, as the Usos and Solo Sikoa helped Roman bury Lesnar under a pile of rubble for the final decisive victory. Who knows how things will turn out between he and Cody Rhodes this year, but until then, I'm afraid I'm going to have to apologize to the Bret Hart fans out there. The sheer quantity of great matches, main events, and career moments that Brock has racked up at SummerSlam nudges him past the Hitman and currently places the bow tie of Mr. SummerSlam securely around his sizable neck as we examine the last two contestants. Ironically, the last two men on our list were considered to be the heir apparent to Lesnar after he left the company. But how do their SummerSlam credentials hold up? Though he was only a cog in the Evolution wheel, Randy Orton's Slam debut came in 2003 as part of the aforementioned Elimination Chamber match. Though his impact in the match wasn't huge besides taking some Goldberg bullets, getting your SummerSlam start in the main event of a world title match is nothing to sneeze at. The following year, Orton did the unthinkable and beat Chris Benoit to become the new youngest world champ of all time. Undoubtedly a massive milestone, but unfortunately diminished due to the circumstances surrounding the man he beat for the belt. It really appeared like the company was going all in on Mr. RKO until the next night happened. Orton spent the next 2 years battling legends, earning a win over The Undertaker at SummerSlam 05 with some help from his dad, Cowboy Bob, and then taking on Hulk Hogan the following year. For his last ever WWE match, the 53-year-old Hulkster got to have his cake and eat it too, such as he did with Mr. Wrestlemania Shawn Michaels the year before. In 2007, Orton battled his quintessential contemporary in John Cena, challenging him for the WWE Championship in the main event. For whatever reason, Orton and Cena's matches never seemed to click or be on a level anywhere near more famous WWE rivalries. While their SummerSlam match was okay, it was barely discernible from the many other matches the pair would have over the years. After missing a year due to injury, Orton came back to SummerSlam in 2009 to once again face John Cena, this time as the defender of the championship. The match was full of all sorts of gimmicks and run-ins, finally ending when Bret DiBiase, Ted Jr.'s younger brother and future government fraudster, helped Randy retain the title. The following year, Orton once again challenged for the WWE title, this time against Sheamus in a last chance match. Had Orton lost, he would never get another shot as long as Sheamus was the champion, and in the end, both men were protected as Orton got the DQ win, meaning the title didn't have to change hands. Where are the balloons and confetti for this one? By 2011, Orton had pivoted from the WWE to the world title, feuding with Christian in one of the better programs that year. The feud peaked at that year's SummerSlam in a no-holds-barred match where the two pulled out all the stops and Orton won the match after a brutal RKO on the ring steps. 2013 saw the emergence of The Authority and the reunion of Orton and his former mentor Triple H in a heel supergroup as the two conspired to screw over Daniel Bryan. After Daniel had done the not impossible but still extremely rare and beat John Cena for the championship, he was immediately screwed by Triple H and beat by Orton, who cashed in his Money in the Bank to claim the title. Let's see how the next few years went. Well, in 2014, he put Roman Reigns over. In 2015, he put Sheamus over. And then in 2016, if you recall, he got his head smashed in by Brock Lesnar. Obviously, Orton's reliability over the years made him a great supporting role for others, though lower down the card. At SummerSlam 2017, he beat Rusev in 10 seconds, which I had totally forgotten about until remembering that Rusev would beat Orton back in quick fashion the following SmackDown and give birth to Rusev Day. So hey, that was something of importance. 2 years later in 2019, Orton set his sights on new WWE champion Kofi Kingston. The two wrestled for the gold at that year's SummerSlam, and there was some intrigue based on their past with each other, though the match bafflingly ended in a double countout, in case you needed any more proof of how little the company cared about Kofi as champion. 2020 saw him continue the trend as the put-over guy for the new hot champions as he lost to Drew McIntyre in a great championship match in the Thunderdome. And finally, at SummerSlam 2021, we saw the high point of one of the best feel-good stories of the year as RK Bro beat AJ Styles and Omos for the Raw Tag Titles. You get it? A great high point? Because, Matt Riddle and, weed. With a few big career moments such as debuting in the main event, winning the world title, and taking on a couple of all-time legends, I would say Randy Orton has a solidly remarkable, though not all-time, SummerSlam resume. It starts off pretty great, but then begins to turn down once you reach the middle of his career. Let's slot him above Triple H, but beneath Bret. Finally, we wrap things up with a look at John Cena, the man who ultimately beat Randy Orton in that race to become the WWE's definitive star for a generation. But ironically, he actually made his SummerSlam debut 1 year after his third-gen counterpart, beating Booker T in the first of a best-of-5 series for the US Championship back in 2004. By the following year, 2005, the Rocket had been fully strapped to Cena, but fans were already beginning to question their allegiance. The first of several internet darlings to challenge and fall to the leader of the C Nation was Chris Jericho, who Cena beat at SummerSlam, then again one night later on Raw to send Y2J on his first major wrestling sabbatical. The SummerSlam match itself wasn't amazing, but it was a big win against a major player, which was great for Cena, even if it was a harbinger of how fans would treat him for the next decade or so. 2006 saw Cena embroiled in arguably the best rivalry of his career as he met Edge in his home territory of Boston in the main event. Cena lost that title match, only for him to return the favor a month later by winning the title back in Edge's hometown of Toronto. The SummerSlam match couldn't hold a candle to their eventual TLC war, but it was a solid building block in their feud. The following year, we had the Randy Orton match. Then in 2008, Cena battled another one of his generation's top stars in Batista. Unfortunately, the match was a hastily built face versus face match that confused fans over who to cheer for, and squandered an opportunity for what should have been a generation-defining matchup. After facing Orton again in 2009, we got what many consider the most controversial of Cena's SummerSlam matches, maybe of his entire career. It's a match that's been brought up before on this channel many times, including a few minutes ago in this very video. That 10-man tag team elimination match between WWE and the Nexus. You can argue whether or not the Nexus should have won this opening round, but it was the manner in which Cena shrugged off the Invaders' biggest attacks and cleaned up at the end that had lots of fans seething for years after the fact. Money in the Bank 2011 saw CM Punk defeat Cena in one of the most emotionally charged matches in WWE title history. A huge move they would soon squander by bringing the Punker back for a return match at that year's SummerSlam. SummerSlam. While the match was good, it couldn't compete with the vibes in Chicago 1 month earlier. Punk would shock the world by beating Cena 2 pay-per-views in a row, but the win was marginalized by a missed foot on the ropes and a post-match attack on Punk by Kevin Nash that allowed Alberto Del Rio to cash in his briefcase to claim the WWE title for his own, a finish so nice they did it again 2 years later. By the summer of 2012, Punk had turned heel once again in order to feud with The Rock, but first found himself in a triple threat match for his WWE title against Cena and The Big Show. Can't imagine why the big guy was placed in this match. Oh wait, it's all very clear now. As WWE reached the halfway point of the 2010s, Cena had largely shed his negative in-ring reputation and was putting on some of the best matches of his career. SummerSlams 2013 and 2014 were both very memorable, but for very different reasons. There was the aforementioned title match with Daniel Bryan in 2013, then his murder at the hands of Brock Lesnar in 2014. The trend continued in 2015 when Cena put Seth Rollins over in a title-for-title match thanks to a little help from Jon Stewart. Those last 4 or 5 years were all shocking in their own way, but nothing could have prepared fans for what happened in 2016 when AJ Styles once again beat John Cena in an awesome, high-profile SummerSlam match. Considering the history of each of these men, you would have been hard-pressed to find that on anyone's bingo card 10 months earlier, let alone 10 years earlier. But it's okay, because the following year, he got his heat back against Baron Corbin. So, you know, even Steven. After a several-year layoff, Cena returned to SummerSlam in 2021 for the first full-crowd show in the post-pandemic era. Though the match between he and Roman Reigns for the Universal title was big on paper, in actuality the encounter itself was a bit of a letdown. I'd argue their match at No Mercy 4 years earlier was a better matchup. It was fine and helped build Roman's godlike resume as the Tribal Chief, but it was clear that the days of Big Match John were firmly in the past. While there were some great matches in there involving some of his best opponents, most of Cena's notable SummerSlam moments came when he was putting someone over, which makes a lot of sense considering he often won at WrestleManias. I would say that lands John somewhere around the middle, above Randy Orton but below Bret Hart. That means that after this incredibly scientific examination looking at prominent matches and career highlights, we here at Wrestling with Regret officially deem Brock Lesnar Mr. SummerSlam. For now at least. But oh shit, like a thief in the night, like the ultimate opportunist that he is, here comes Edge into the mix. Made his SummerSlam debut in 1998 as the mystery partner of Sable, one of the top 3 popular acts in the company at the time. Tag gauntlet match with Christian in 99, the very first and absolutely game-changing TLC match in 2000, strong singles matches with Lance Storm and Eddie Guerrero, triple threat for the IC title in 04, art imitating life with Matt Hardy in 05, WWE and world title matches in 06 and 08, then after a lengthy first retirement, came out to the Brood gimmick against Seth Rollins in 2021, which reeked of awesomeness. That puts the rated R superstar, still like 3rd in the rankings? But that's just our opinion, folks, and Lord knows wrestling's full of those. Who do you think deserves the title of Mr. SummerSlam? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, hit that bell icon to get all the notifications. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.